The next type of tissues are connective tissues. And we will go into pretty good depth into the different types of connective tissues. Generally, what do we use connective tissues for? Well, it's going to depend. There are many different types of connective tissues, and they do a lot of very different things. In general, we can say that connective tissues are going to support and bind other tissues and organs together. They're going to be responsible for protecting other structures. Some of them provide insulation. Some of them, like blood connective tissue, are going to be transporting materials. And one commonality between all of these tissues is they produce matrix. Matrix is non-living stuff, or at least most of them are going to produce a matrix, this non-living stuff around the cells. And the first type of connective tissue, and again, like with epithelial tissue, you need to say the whole name. You will lose points if you don't say connective tissue as part of the name. So areolar connective tissue, when you look at it, I like to think of my old Italian grandmother when she make us some pasta. One day she was making some vermicelli, some angel hair pasta, and she didn't have enough for the whole family. So she put in some great big linguine noodles too. She put them together, cooked them down, had them in the colander, and as she was walking over to the table to serve us dinner, she spilled them and they fell onto the floor, and these big thick spaghetti noodles were mixed in with the thin spaghetti noodles, and then there's some olives thrown in there. And that's what areolar connective tissue looks like to me. I hope you're not getting hungry as a result of this example. Now, the thicker pasta, or the thicker protein fibers that we find in areolar connective tissue, these are collagen fibers, collagen being an important protein. The thinner fibers are elastic fibers, or sometimes they're called elastin fibers. And the olives that I was talking about are the cells that you can see here, and these cells are called fibroblast. Now, the suffix blast that you see here is a word we're going to be using a lot this semester. And when you think of blast, you think be, blast, build. So fibroblasts are the fiber building cells that are going to be found in this tissue. And areolar connective tissue is used kind of like packing peanuts. You find this tissue in between other cells and tissues, and it's going to help provide protection to those cells and tissues. I will reference this table that can be located in lab number 2, and we will begin to fill these in as we go along. Here's an excellent example of areolar connective tissue. You can very easily see the big thick collagen fibers here, as well as the thin elastin fibers. And these little dots that you see here, these are going to be the fibroblasts, the fiber building cells that are going to make up the matrix of this tissue. Here again is another example of areolar connective tissue. Notice that there really isn't any organization to the collagen and elastin proteins. It looks like they are just spread out all over the place. And here we see some of these cells at a lower magnification. Areolar connective tissue. Next type of tissue is adipose connective tissue. Now, as you're looking at adipose connective tissue, it's going to seem a little odd at first. Kind of reminds me of a tissue that was eaten by moths. So you're going to see the cell membranes of these cells, and then the inside of the cells is going to look empty. Okay, it's going to look empty because most of the mass of the cell is going to be made up of a fat vacuole. This vacuole is going to store triglycerides, which we know are used for long-term energy storage. And it just so happens that the stain that they use to dye the cell membranes and the nuclei is a water-soluble stain. And since the vacuole is made up of triglycerides, which is a fat-soluble or hydrophobic molecule, this does not pick up the stain, so it looks empty on the inside. The proper term for an adipose connective tissue cell is an adipocyte. Just like we saw the word blast before, meaning build, CYTE means cell. So adipocyte is an adipose connective tissue cell. And these cells are used for storing energy, the triglycerides, also used for protection and insulation. And here is a nice hand-drawn picture of some adipose connective tissue, and looking at adipocytes. And here we see some photomicrographs, some pictures of adipocytes. And as I said, it doesn't look like there's an awful lot here. So if we zoom in a little bit, well, we can see some more stuff. So we can see cell membrane. We can see some cell membrane here. You can see a nucleus affiliated with this cell. And most of the cell looks empty. This tells you that you're looking at adipose connective tissue. And the same thing here, adipose connective tissue. The next type of tissue is dense regular connective tissue. Now the thing that I remember when I'm looking at dense regular connective tissue is it's going to look like you've got these wavy parallel lines with the occasional fibroblast cell included. In this case, the matrix is going to be made up of collagen fibers that are arranged parallel but kind of wavy. In this case, the fibers are going to be packed together so densely that there's not going to be an awful lot of empty space between it. That's why we call it dense regular connective tissue. And the cells are the fibroblasts. Dense regular connective tissue is going to make up an important part of tendons, which are going to connect muscles to bones, as well as ligaments, which are going to connect bones together. You want these to be really strong connections, so that's why dense regular connective tissue is used here. And here we see dense regular connective tissue, and if you look at the arrangement of the fibers, do you see how the fibers are running parallel to one another, but they're kind of wavy? Okay, this tells us that this is classic dense regular connective tissue. And here's a slightly different picture at a higher magnification that shows the waves really clearly. Next type of connective tissue is cartilage connective tissue. And we've got three different types of cartilage connective tissue. First of which is called hyaline cartilage connective tissue. Don't forget to say the whole name here. So hyaline cartilage connective tissue is going to have matrix that's going to contain collagen fibers, but the collagen fibers are not going to be easy to see. So you're going to look at this tissue and it's going to look kind of like jello. But every once in a while inside of the jello there's going to be a blank empty space that's going to be filled with a cell. So a cartilage connective tissue cell is called a chondrocyte, and it's located in a space in the matrix called lacuna. So lacuna is the space within a connective tissue in which we would find a cell. Specifically, hyaline cartilage connective tissue is going to be very important when we're talking about articulations or joints. It's the cartilage that's going to form the superficial surface where the bones are going to meet and articulate or move over one another. And hyaline cartilage connective tissue is also going to form much of the nose. And here we see hyaline cartilage connective tissue. Found pretty commonly in here. We've got these spaces within the tissue called lacuna, and the space has the chondrocyte inside of it. And here's a slightly higher magnification showing again lots of matrix in here. You can't really see the fibers, but you can see the space in the matrix, the lacuna, filled up with chondrocyte. Next type of cartilage connective tissue is elastic cartilage connective tissue. And elastic cartilage connective tissue is going to have matrix that contains collagen, but you can't really see it. and it's going to have elastic fibers or elastin fibers, and you will be able to see those. And again, the cells are chondrocytes, and they're located in spaces in the matrix called lacuna. We find elastic cartilage connective tissue very commonly in the external ear, also called the auricle or the pinna. And if you reach up, you should be able to bend your ear a little bit. That gives you an idea of what elastic cartilage connective tissue looks like. Here we see a photomicrograph of elastic cartilage connective tissue, and although it's not super easy to see, you can see some fibers over here. You can see some fibers over here. They're really thin, telling you that those are elastic cartilage connective tissue, the elastic fibers in elastic cartilage connective tissue. Okay, and the last type of cartilage is going to be fibrocartilage connective tissue. Here the matrix is going to be less firm than hyaline cartilage connective tissue, and it's going to contain collagen, and here the fibers are going to be really evident. You'll be able to see them very clearly. And again, the cells are chondrocytes that are located in lacuna, or the plural form is lacunae. And classic example of fibrocartilage is within the intervertebral discs that are going to separate one vertebra from another. If you've ever heard of somebody slipping a disc, we're talking about the fibrocartilage connective tissue that makes up the disc between the vertebra. And here we see kind of a lower magnification picture of fibrocartilage connective tissue.